This is episode number 213, my full-length, uncensored interview with Jill, a six-figure escort from Manhattan with business lessons for you. That's coming up.
This is the RED Podcast, the marketing podcast for influencers. Rise above the noise. Expand your audience. Deliver impact. Here's your host, David Hooper.
If you downloaded this episode without looking at the title, you skipped over the very front portion where I discuss what I'm talking about. I'm going to give you one more warning. I'm talking to a high-end escort. She runs a six-figure business selling time and companionship. This episode is not for everybody. It may not be for you. You may be offended when she starts telling the story of you know him. He's been in a few sitcoms and a Anyway, in the discussion, when she brings him up, you're going to want to turn this episode off because we talk about all night. We talk about we talk about doing all kinds of we talk about off of and just when you think it's over, a knock at the door happens and then joins in and things get really fucked up and he's high on and then the mayor of walks in, gets a wild hair up his ass, and he says, hey, you know what we should do? So then they call up, and then it gets really crazy. Then the whole thing goes to hell. And there's and all sorts of and just when you think it's over, another knock at the door, and then comes in, and she comes in with a pack full of Anyway, at that point, you're going to want to turn this episode off because it might make for some uncomfortable situations. If you've got kids in the car, maybe you're listening to this at work, use caution. This is the RED Podcast, the podcast for influencers. If you're a blogger, podcaster, nonfiction author, a person with a message to spread, this is the podcast for you. I talk about how to reach, expand, and develop your audience. If you've got a message that you want to get out into the world, this is the right place for you. Hey, I was just kidding about that story. This episode is all business. I am talking to Jill. She is an escort out of New York City. Due to the nature of her business, she's not always accessible to media, but thanks to my connections in the music business, had somebody vouch for me. We started our relationship via text, told her I was interested in talking to her, had a short phone conversation. She was up for it. Got her on the line, recorded everything, and I'm getting ready to play it for you right now. She's a very sharp businesswoman, and there is a lot that you can learn from her. Her business is not what you think. More or less, this episode has no commentary from me. If you're interested in the previous episode, I've got a couple of highlights from this interview. That's at redpodcast.com/212, and I do add commentary to that. A few of the things that we talked about what she had to overcome to get started. We talk about advertising and legality. We talk about client acquisitions. We talk about reviews, what it's like to have somebody review you, not just your book, not just your podcast, but you online and how she deals with that. We talk about connected moments. We talk about charging high-end prices and what it's like to hang with high-dollar people. You're going to get a lot out of this. So without further ado, here's my interview with Jill. Jill's with me via Skype. We're going to say where you are because where you are is not so small that anybody could track you down.
Of course.
You're in New York?
Yes, I am.
And there are a few of you in New York, so.
There are a couple of us, yes.
So, Jill in New York, describe your business for me.
I am a high-class escort. Do I need to elaborate more on that? I guess I probably should, huh?
Yeah, let's do that. And I'm curious, too, about how you describe yourself. High-class escort. Can you kind of give the hierarchy of the type of work that you do as well?
It's generally, I guess you could say price point. Causes you to be, higher class, if you will. And, we're paid for time and companionship. And, whatever happens between two consenting adults is what happens. So does that work for you?
You're in the business of time and companionship.
Yes, sir.
We'll leave it at that. So I'm curious to know how you got into this, and I think that this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs will relate to, in that there are a lot of excuses why you couldn't do what you're doing or why you shouldn't do what you're doing. Can you talk about some of the things that you had to deal with when either making the decision and some of the things that you still deal with now?
Obviously, there's a lot of stigma, a lot of judgment, and I don't know if that's really ever going to go away, unfortunately. That's pretty much the biggest hurdle. I mean, also, it's technically illegal, except for time and companionship. So that's not illegal. If you could, yeah.
Let's say that you did run into legal problems. Is that something that is going to get you off the hook? Just say, no, it was time and companionship?
Yes, actually. Legally, if we write anything about sex, that could definitely be used against us. It's always very discreet, and there's never communication about it, really. Any, sort of vulgar, descriptive things about it. And so, on websites and ads and stuff, it's you're paid for your time and companionship versus being paid for sex.
Let's talk about how you advertise, because obviously there's some limitations there. And is it just kind of like everybody knows, wink, wink, here's what's going on?
As far as I've ever noticed, yeah. I mean, I haven't had anybody contact me that didn't know what was going on. So I think everybody that comes to the advertising sites do know what they're getting themselves into, for sure. And there's certain, quite a few different advertising platforms for you to use to advertise on. If you're on there, you know what you're doing.
Well, let's jump into that. Let's talk about client acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
What is the very first step to you getting a new client? Is it a word of mouth thing? Do you advertise for most of your clients? How does that work? What does it look like?
Generally speaking, it's advertising. Occasionally you'll get word of mouth situations, but most of the time it's through different advertising sites.
It's mostly the internet?
Yeah, definitely. The age of the paper is gone. Yeah, it's always through the internet. And usually what happens is a client will email me. I never post my phone number or anything like that. Some girls do, but I would never do that. Why
wouldn't you do that? Because it seems like that would be maybe a barrier to people kind of messing with you or just kicking the tires.
Exactly. And some girls can deal with that. And I just don't feel like having people text me all the time and that sort of thing, or call me all the time at all hours, because some people just don't realize that they can't call you at 3 a.m. So, so we try to keep that at bay.
What does the ad that you place look like?
It's just a general ad. I mean, it's kind of, I never really know how to describe this when people ask, because it's.
Is it like Craigslist? Do you use Craigslist anymore? I know that they had a big crackdown on this a couple years ago, maybe.
I have never used Craigslist. I think they may still have a little dating part of it that people use for sugar daddy situations or something like that. But there's no longer the adult back page part of it, I don't think.
Do you use Backpage? That's another one.
I have not, no.
Okay, so these are specific sites that are just for the services that you offer, not a general classified site.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why anybody coming to the site would know what they're getting themselves into.
How do you differentiate yourself? Do you feel like it's a commodity, or are you providing something beyond time and companionship?
I mean, that's generally that is pretty much what you advertise, is to stick out, to be different, but girls range from being, you do from girlfriend experience where it's more of a compassionate interaction, or then you have, and it ranges from there pretty much to porn star situations if somebody's looking for that. You allude to that in ads without actually saying that.
Okay.
So
you've got the ad, and you're doing things via email, so you can time shift, get back with them whenever. And I would imagine also that would be a protection issue for you. It's sort of like, to me, it seems like, kind of like a 5-day waiting period on guns. It's that you've had time to think about this before you reply, before you make the deal. So anybody that you're dealing with is going to be maybe more serious than that 3 a.m. guy who's just lonely and making a call. Exactly. So the person emails you. He says, "Hi, I'd like to have some time and companionship." Mm-hmm. And what is the next step?
Generally, I obviously respond and I do a sort of screening. We'll have like a little bit of conversation and I generally ask for references from other women that they've met, or if they don't have any, then I ask for like verification of like a LinkedIn profile or like an email from work or just like a little bit more information so I can kind of gather that they're not a complete crazy.
And are these guys willing to hand that over? That seems pretty gutsy because you're still relatively anonymous. And
this is true.
These are, I'm assuming, people with money because you are on the high end with what you charge. And there's a lot at risk. And maybe they like that. But they don't have problems handing that information over?
Some do, some don't. Everybody's kind of different. You know, some people email me automatically through a work email. So I kind of have that information already. And there's different services for you to basically screen people through their emails and like their phone numbers if they give that to me. And so I can kind of do some like behind the scenes work. I mean, I basically just see if they're a person or not. And if I gather, you know, if it's like, if I can Google their name and their phone number and I get the same thing from like the LinkedIn and their name and stuff like that, like if things connect, then I feel more comfortable. But if somebody gives me a crazy email and then I can't find any information and I can't connect the dots, then that always kind of piques my concern. And I don't keep anybody's information. I'm not too concerned about where you work. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to make sure that I can connect the dots, basically.
Right.
Or if, find out you're in some profession that I don't want to be, like if you're a cop or something and I can find information on you being a cop, that would be something I'd be concerned about.
Is that something that worries you, that it could be some kind of setup and somebody's possibly a cop and it's a fake profile and they've just put up a LinkedIn page?
I mean, occasionally, yeah. I think it's just kind of an always in the back of your head thought. I've never had any problems, knock on wood, and like it's never really been an issue. And they kind of target more agencies. They target when they can kind of bust more people at once, basically.
And you're an independent worker.
I am, yes.
Meaning you keep 100% of the money, you do your own advertising, you do your own booking.
Mm-hmm. Pay my taxes.
Pay your taxes. That's how they get you.
Yeah, exactly. That's how they get everybody.
Don't want to be like Al Capone.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious to know about the client match, because this is something that anybody who does, I don't know if it's time and companionship, but time and something like coaches, you have consultants, you've got your personal trainer where you're trading dollars for hours. You're spending a lot of time with people, and beyond just knowing that this person is legitimate, has the funds to pay you, isn't a cop. Tell me more about the client match and your screening process to know if this potential client is going to be somebody that you want to work with.
I mean, generally I can kind of tell through conversation via email. I can sort of, there's like small talk. If somebody has small talk with me, I feel a little bit more comfortable and kind of, it's always hard to work with somebody that has no conversation skills whatsoever. And I think that's in any business. So I can kind of tell whether it's going to flow easy. Generally, I can find the good and talk to pretty much anybody. So I never really have too much of an issue with that. So I kind of see whoever goes through my screening process and I feel comfortable with, I generally see. Whether I see them again is sort of up to both of us, really. If they enjoy my company, then they can contact me again and see me another time, that sort of thing.
Is that part of the service that you offer when we say time and companionship? Is some of it just not, what people would think when they think of time and companionship? Is some of it that small talk that we're talking about?
Oh, for sure. I spend a lot of time talking to people when I'm with them, for sure. There's a lot more conversation than there is everything else, to be honest.
I think that's huge for anybody who's working with clients is that there's the reason that we think that they're hiring us, and then there's the actual reason, like a secondary payoff, if you will. And sometimes it's not that thing that we're advertising necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Talk to me about the negotiation. I've got a buddy of mine out in Nevada,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a souvenir, I guess he called it a menu from one of the brothels out there. And he said it's just like a restaurant menu, except it had the services that they offered at the legal brothels in Nevada. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really interesting because everything was up front and everything's got a price on it, and you negotiate it, then you get what you pay for. Is that a similar thing to what you're doing?
Definitely not a menu of services. That's very much a brothel situation. Some guys do look for a menu of services. Occasionally you do get those emails that guys will use acronyms for things, and that's when it kind of also gets a little uncomfortable when they ask you if you do XYZ, blah, 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 and like all these like acronyms for stuff.
This, as a side note, every niche has its own language
Mm-hmm.
that they use to communicate, whether musicians or realtors or attorneys. And in this industry, there are a lot of acronyms. And
yes.
Some people would probably be familiar with some of them, and you probably know even more than most.
Sometimes, though, I'll have people contact me and I have to Google it because I have no idea what they asked me for, because it's like, what is this? I have no idea what that could even be.
Right. That might be a red flag, right?
Oh, for sure. That's definitely a red flag.
The really freaky stuff.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
So you've got people that they're trying to, I guess, just make sure that you're offering what it is that they want.
Yes. It's kind of an interesting world because you get sort of guys that want just like a connected companionship moment, like session. And then you have some guys that are just, acronyms.
Like a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, the higher end you end up going, you get less and less of the acronym gentleman. You get more of a companionship situation where it's more, we go out to dinner and we spend time together and we, it's more of a connected relationship than just acronyms.
Talk about your rise to the level that you're at. Most careers, we've got that. You start out as the intern, and then you're the junior attorney.
Yeah.
And then the senior attorney, and then you make partner. And is it the same way in your business? Do you have to kind of learn the ropes and be able to negotiate these connections better, and you're able to charge more and more once you are?
Yes, for sure. I mean, experience is huge. That makes a big difference. So you start off at a lower price point, and then once you start getting more knowledge and experience, and then you can start, then you start upping other parts of your business, apartment and clothing and keeping up appearances, basically. So once you kind of start to realize what you're doing and how to be more, I don't know, classy. That sounds weird, me saying that, but it's kind of, yeah, I mean, the more experience you get and the more you understand, the more you can relate to people and have better conversations with people, and the more experience.
Is that part of your work? Like being able to have these conversations with these, we'll call them high-end men, I guess, like Wall Street attorneys, people that are very successful in business?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like being able to have a conversation with somebody goes a long way. I've learned that makes a huge difference in whether I have a return client or not, is if I can carry on a conversation.
And is that like current events?
It can be. It can pretty much be anything, really. I've had some very bizarre conversations with people about the most random things, and just being able to, unless you're one of those people, like I've had clients where it's like pulling teeth trying to get conversation from them, despite what the kind of questions I ask and how they're just, awkward people, which is normal.
Yeah. Well, you and I are kind of in the same business because I got some awkward interviews, and
Yeah, of course.
It's awful.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's really uncomfortable. When they leave, you're like, oh wow, I'm so glad that's over. That was so uncomfortable.
I want to take it back to the negotiation. I understand that you're not necessarily negotiating all the acronyms up front, but let's talk about boundaries for a minute. What, I mean, let's say you're a life coach and you're dealing with somebody via the phone, or you're dealing with somebody in person. It's a whole lot less intimate than what you deal with, Jill. Your situation, I would imagine, if somebody's maybe trying to get more than they initially bargained for, it's risky, it's scary. How do you handle a client that maybe is asking for a little too much?
No. No goes a long way, really. You just stand your ground and just tell somebody no. And it's as simple as that. I mean, if somebody I guess you're kind of generally, maybe you're asking if they get more physical. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Well, I mean, like, let's take it from just like a consulting point of view, a consultant point of view, in that sometimes somebody will hire you on for a job and they want you to do more. Like, for example, if you're the assistant, all of a sudden you're going to pick up the dry cleaning, you're going to get ball game tickets, or you're covering for the guy's been drinking too much, or you know what I mean? You're doing stuff that's not within the job description. I think all jobs have that. But due to the nature of your job, I could imagine you could be in some
weird situations. We'll call it like that, to where maybe you're fearing for your safety. And it's not like you can just hang up the phone if you're doing a phone consultation. You're actually in the room with a guy, and it might get a little weird. Well, I think that's kind of where the screening comes in, and having conversations with somebody beforehand. Intuition plays a huge role in this business. It really, I mean, I suppose any business it really does, but this business, if I get a sketchy feeling, I end it immediately. I don't want to put myself in a position where something bad could happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if something does feel a little off, and I am put in a position, or somebody kind of has a weird conversation, or things get a little, I generally, if you just are stern and say no, or you kind of, or change the subject or something like that, I haven't had any situations where things have gone wrong.
Let me ask you a sort of a related question. Have you ever had to fire a client?
Yes, I have had to, and I am extremely patient. So I have boundaries for sure, but I'm patient with people that are just kind of a little like not understanding things. But I have had moments where I've had to stop seeing a client because I couldn't handle them anymore. And that's usually just because they're not worth the money, basically, is what it comes down to.
Right.
Like, I had one client that he just turned out to physically just kind of was not. He was a much older gentleman, and he was very sweet, but it kind of got to a point where I couldn't handle being around him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go into with things. That's why I'm kind of like holding off. I don't know you don't want to explain or say too much stuff. I don't know.
We can leave it at that, but I would imagine that there are people, because you're dealing with time and companionship, that physicality would be part of that connection. And there's also just emotion and personality is also, and that's why I wanted to get you in here, because I feel that what you're doing is so intimate and so raw. And I see people where it's like an energetic drain on them when they work, because you've got a client that is demanding and is always texting and is always calling and always has deadlines. And to me, what you're doing is like 10 times that. Yeah. It's like anything that I could think of working with any client, I can't imagine the level that you work at. And on that thought, let's talk about the emotionality of it. Mm-hmm. We've all been fired by clients, but we are not the product. In some ways, you are the product here. Do you take those things personally? Or have you ever been fired?
In my industry, it's not really being fired. You don't really know. You just stop hearing from somebody. So you have no idea what has gone on their side.
Right.
If they find somebody else, or they just didn't enjoy themselves. I don't know that sort of stuff. I stop hearing from somebody. So it doesn't feel as personal if somebody's like, I'm sorry, I can no longer work with you.
There's a book, and you might have read it. It's called Brothel by Alexa Albert.
No, I haven't. I probably should, though.
She goes to Mustang Ranch in Nevada, and she was a health worker, like a sociologist, and she goes in and basically meets these women. She was doing a test, but ended up staying there for a while and really getting to know them. And she talks about what they call the lineup, where a client will come in looking for time and companionship, and all the women of the house will line up. And on one hand, you want this guy to pick you, and on the other hand, it's emotionally raw sometimes for these guys to pick you. And that's kind of where I'm going with that, in that when you are the product, I would think that it could be very, very tough not to take it personally. But I think it's a good attitude that people will not hire you no matter what your business is for a number of reasons, and people won't return to you for a number of reasons.
Yeah. I lived in Australia for a small amount of time. That's actually how I got my start. I started working at a brothel in Sydney. We did a lineup situation, and that was very stressful. And it did get kind of the emotional of, is he going to pick me? Is he not going to pick me? It would be taxing. It'd be a lot to take. But here in the States, because I'm independent, I don't see all of that. It's not like I'm standing in a lineup and I know that he's emailed 7 different girls, and that part's missing, thankfully. So I don't have to dwell on that part.
Brothels, they're legal in Sydney?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So I imagine that's kind of like working a job.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between doing this work for somebody else and doing it independently, going out on your own?
I mean, there's pros and cons to both. Working out of a house brothel was a good experience because you don't have to seek out clients. You don't have to wait. And you have the safety of being in a house that's clean and well kept, and you have security, and you have girls around you for emotional support. There's something really nice about that. But then being independent, you also get I decide when I want to work. I decide who I see. There's more freedom to that.
Do you miss that camaraderie? I know so many entrepreneurs, especially those that work on the internet, where they feel completely isolated. And I would imagine that's magnified with your business because probably not everybody knows what it is that you do.
Exactly. I do have a couple girlfriends and that actually work as well. And then I have some other friends that know that I work. They're not in the same industry, but they know, and they are completely accepting of it. So I do have a support system, but it was actually I do miss the support of working in a house with lots of other girls. It was hard because some girls got picked a lot more than you did, or vice versa. So that was always a little, you have that moment of sort of not cattiness, but jealousy sort of. And then you realize that we're all doing the same thing and we're all, connected in that way. And you kind of get over the jealousy thing.
Right.
So, because everybody gets their chance, really.
I write books and this podcast, both of which people are able to review them online. And something that I've seen is that you can go to Amazon and you'll see authors that concentrate on those 1-star reviews. This book sucked.
Yeah.
One of my favorite reviews now, which stung at the time, the subject said, "A joke, just like David Hooper himself." That was the subject.
Oof.
You've got something similar in your industry. Is it the Erotic review? Is that what it's called?
Yes, the Erotic review.
Let's talk about that, because it's more or less like Amazon or Yelp, where you've got reviews of time and companionship.
Yes.
But I would think that that's really hard not to take personally. Do you read those reviews?
This is such a big topic. I have read them, yes. I don't agree with them. I understand their purpose, but I don't agree with them because the erotic review, they won't post reviews unless they're vulgar, basically. There's a criteria of what you have to say in order for them to post reviews.
You mean, does it just get very graphic as to like what time and companionship looks like, for example?
Very graphic.
Okay.
And it's unnecessary when they get as graphic as they do. Some guys use it for the right reasons, where it's like you can see whether does she live in a bad neighborhood or something like that, or like there's some small things that it's like people that I understand why they would use something like the erotic review. But when it comes down to does she do these certain things, then that's why I want to see her. And it turns us into sort of, I mean, it feels dirty to me. I kind of feel like I'm not a person anymore when guys kind of go a little overboard with that stuff. And I mean, there's both sides. I get why guys use it, and I understand the review idea of knowing whether it's a good session or whatever, but it still makes it kind of is a little demeaning in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think reviews are interesting in that it's sort of like we talked about, like why a client will let you go, that things come up and you never know what's going on in their life. And reviews are always interesting to me in that the people that review, I think they're more likely to review if they've had a bad experience.
Yeah.
Because they're pissed and they want everybody to know, or they want to vent, or they're just that kind of person.
Yeah.
But I have to wonder how accurate reviews in general are online. A lot of them not verified. I think Amazon, I think Yelp, they've tried to do those things. I don't know how erotic review works. I don't know if you have to be a member or not of those sites.
You do. You either be a paid member or you do enough reviews that you get a free membership.
See, I would worry about that though. When you're just doing enough reviews, if somebody's just making things up, if those people weren't even there,
Yes, that happens a lot. There's an infamous guy on there that does that. And he'll make up reviews and then he'll contact the girl and say, didn't you like my review? Now can you see me for free because I wrote you a nice review? But then his reviews are very vulgar and say stuff that you would never do. And that's the other thing. Guys kind of embellish a lot of stuff. They're basically writing their own erotic novels.
Some revisionism in there.
Yeah. And it's kind of, it's a case-by-case basis too. Like, just because something happens with one client doesn't mean it's going to happen with the next. And if guy writes something crazy in the review, then you're expected to be that way or do that random thing all the time. And if they make it up, then somebody thinks that you're doing all these things and you're not. So it gets really shady and there's a huge underbelly that's frustrating about it.
Talk about that for a minute, because it sounds to me like this would be exhausting to, maybe have some people that aren't coming into this on the same page as you are. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs deal with this, but with you, it's just 10 times, 100 times greater just because of the nature of the work. Is that draining to you? How do you keep grounded and energy management and like have Jill off work and then Jill on work? Is it two different people?
Yes and no. I mean, obviously it depends on client, on my level of comfortability with the client, whether I'm meeting them the first time, whether I've gotten to know them. The more, it depends on how much I share about myself and my life. I'm a very genuine person, so that never goes away. But like the level of how much I share of who I am personally depends on how often I've seen the client or if I'm comfortable enough to share part of my life with them, anything like that. But there's definitely a difference between Jill on work and Jill not on work.
Do your clients really know you, though? Is there some wall that's always up?
Always, yeah. I think that's anything. Just you got to always protect yourself. I mean, I'm kind of in a strange business where I have to sort of always have that wall up.
Do you feel that anybody knows you?
My friends do. Do you mean client-wise?
No, just people in general. Because it seems like that would be tough in that you can't really open up to clients for safety reasons. And then because of judgment from friends, that you couldn't really even let them know what you do. So it seemed like it would be a tough place to be.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I'm very thankful that I have a good group of people with me, a good group of friends now. I haven't in the past, and I've run into some unfortunate incidences with friends. It does make it hard, for sure. There's definitely a secret life.
One of the things that I thought that was interesting about the Alexa Albert book about the Mustang Ranch, and I've seen this in documentaries as well, is that these brothels in Nevada, the room where the women work is also the room where they sleep. Mm-hmm. And the way it works, just because of health and things, they have to live there 24 hours a day. If they leave, they come back, they've got to get tested. It's pretty amazing. It's an amazing way to live. I wouldn't want to do it. It's almost like they're incarcerated while they're there working. So they'll stay a week, they'll stay 2 weeks, then they'll leave, come back, and they do shifts like that.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about how you separate the working Jill versus non-working Jill. Do you have different environments? For example, I don't know, like maybe you do just the opposite of the work that you're doing. Like I know some guys in a strip club, for example, and they go work at church. And you know what I mean? It's like, I guess they feel like it balances each other out. Talk more to me about the energy management. I think this is one of the toughest things that entrepreneurs have to deal with, because we're workaholics, a lot of us. We work all the time. And then how do we turn that off? And when we're with our wives or with our husbands, we're thinking about work. And then when we're working, we're thinking about our wives or our husbands. So it's always that gray area that we're in.
Yeah. It's kind of, it's just, I think it's going to be a struggle a lot of times. Like it's just a struggle to balance it sometimes, because you have to separate it. I don't know. I think I just do it in my head. Emotionally, I separate it. So I'm trying to think of how to answer that.
Well, let me ask you this on a related question. Do you have like hours that you work? Do you make sure like Monday is always off? Can you separate it on like a daily basis like that?
I try to sometimes. I don't usually work past like 11 o'clock at night. I don't usually see anybody past 11 o'clock.
I would think the nature of the work is that you're working whenever they're calling you. You're on their schedule.
Yes and no. I mean, 98% of my clients aren't a random email like, hey, can I see you in an hour? Okay. It's usually scheduled, so it's not whenever. I mean, and if they schedule it 3 days ahead and they want to see me at 11 o'clock, at night, then I'll see them because it's 3 days before. So I can be prepared, but I won't meet somebody same day unless I know them well enough that I feel comfortable, just kind of feel comfortable. So, I mean, I try to schedule everything. I very rarely everything's usually scheduled in advance.
One of the things that I love about your business is that there's client confidentiality. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I do working with various celebrities. A lot of them don't want people to know that they've had help with their marketing. They want it to look like it's natural and look like they were successful naturally. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with confidentiality? Because this is something that if somebody knew that, well, for some people, careers would be ruined. If you're somebody like Charlie Sheen, maybe, he just throws it out there and we kind of expect it from him. Yeah. But most people, I would say, probably, they don't want it to be known that they're hiring you. Do you have like drastic measures of confidentiality? I'm assuming you don't talk about them. If you see them in public, you're not going to say, hey, what's up?
Yeah, I mean, that's a general, definite rule. If I see a client outside, I may look at them, but I won't acknowledge. And if somebody came, I had one incident when somebody came up to me and I was out with somebody else, out with a friend of mine, and I had a client come up to me and it was just kind of like, I think I was a deer in headlights. I didn't know how to react. So it's kind of, you just sort of, it's within the confines of our meeting. Like nothing goes outside of that. You know, I might talk about with my girlfriends about the meeting, but I don't divulge secrets of like who somebody is and anything like that. Like nobody needs to know. It doesn't need to be talked about, pretty much.
With that said, is this a cash business? You taking personal checks, PayPal, swipe?
It depends. A lot of girls do a lot of different things. I generally do cash. I've tried to keep everything else away. I've used credit cards. I have a Square, I think. I haven't used it in a while.
Does it just bill as consulting or something?
Yeah.
Sneaky.
Yeah, of course. I've got I pay taxes. I have a proper business. But I still try to keep it from being completely recorded all the time.
I want to go back to pricing.
Okay.
What kind of competition is there for a service like this? Or do you feel competition? Because obviously you're a unique person and that's part of this because it is a very personal service. But where does competition come into play with this? And how does that affect your pricing or does it?
It does. It definitely, I don't know, I'm trying to think how to explain that. It's definitely competitive, but you do have to realize that you are your own person and people are going to pay for what you ask for. So I don't know, I think it just goes back to the ads and being able to convey yourself as who you are, and people will either like that or they won't, and they'll either pay it or they won't. So if they, I've had people that have tried to barter with me or kind of,
You mean barter like trade something or just to negotiate?
I've had that, and I've also had negotiations too, where, I think that's just ridiculous. Either you're going to pay it or you're not. So there's no need to negotiate it.
So is that kind of how your situation works? You're very firm on the price and there's no haggling.
Yeah. There's no negotiation whatsoever.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And did that happen from the very beginning?
Not so much. When I first started, after I worked at the brothel and I started venturing out on my own, I was susceptible to negotiations because I didn't know any better. And then I ended up meeting a woman that kind of took me under her wing, and I realized that was, this is such a specific sort of intimate industry that negotiating is just kind of not necessary and just ridiculous to do that for what I'm offering.
Do you get paid up front for what you're offering?
Yes.
You've never been stiffed then?
No, I have never been stiffed. Maybe like a little bit less, but not like stiffed.
Right. It's like there's an envelope here and I'm putting it down on the dresser. I've seen these movies before. I know how it works. I know how it works from movies. That's why I'm talking to you, because I think that how we perceive that something like this works is completely different. And you're running a real business here. Like you said, you've got the company set up, you pay taxes. This is not like some kind of hobby. This is not like, oh, I'm desperate, I'm going to go down on the street, walk around. This is a real business.
Yes.
You think you'll be doing it in 10 years?
Probably not, no. I do have other goals in mind. It's just, I do enjoy it a lot. So I'm going to do it while I can and enjoy it while I can.
What's the high point and low point?
Of emotionally, money? What do you mean by that?
Well, just what's the best part of the job and the worst part?
Oh, okay. I really enjoy meeting new people, and I've met some very fascinating people for sure. So I really enjoy that. I enjoy the conversations and kind of getting to know new people in different walks of life too. From everything. I've met people that have done all sorts of crazy things. And then I would say the low is probably goes back to the judgment and people's stigma and the occasional just obnoxious client that won't say anything, that you have to pull conversation out of, and you're just like, okay, that was just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like to see time and companionship legalized in the United States?
Yes, it would make it safer. I would hope that it would help with the judgment too, but I doubt that's ever going to happen.
Right.
That's going to be a long time before that goes away.
Right. Yeah, it's a funny business, sex work in general, that if you look at the amount of money that pornography, for example, generates, and the amount of people that are pay-per-view or on Pornhub or DVDs or however they get it, obviously people are consuming this.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like we've got a lot of judgment against it. We're fascinated by it and we buy it, but we somehow have a separation between us and them, like the people making it are different. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, to
mm-hmm.
show that this is a real business. This is not a woman who has done this by circumstance. This is a choice, free will. You're independent. There's no pimp. There's no
mm-hmm.
kind of madam from a brothel and manipulation or something like that. You made the choice, and this is how it looks like when you're in the choice.
Exactly.
Was there anything with that thought that you want people to know about you or the work you do or how you're running your business? Anything that I didn't ask?
I guess if we go back to the judgment thing, I'm running a business. I'm not out to steal somebody's husband or boyfriend or out to ruin anybody's life. It's just purely a business and a service. It's not about me being, I take care of myself. I'm a person. I'm not dirty. I'm not trying to do anything wrong. I'm just living my life and running my business. If that makes sense.
Well, Jill, I appreciate your time and companionship. You're on RED Podcast.
Oh, I didn't charge you beforehand. Crap.
We didn't negotiate this.
I have gotten stiffed before then. Thank you.
Well, there's a story for you.
Right?
That wasn't so bad, was it? Pretty painless. As I said, the inside, different than the outside. It's like that for everything. It's like that for your business. If you've got questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me. @DavidHooper on Twitter is how to do that. If you want to subscribe to make sure that you don't miss an episode of RED Podcast, redpodcast.com lets you do that with one click. Doesn't matter if you use an iPhone, an Android, however you get your podcast, one click is all it takes to make sure you never miss an episode of RED Podcast. More coming. Thanks for listening to RED Podcast. I'll see you on the next episode.
You've been listening to RED Podcast, the marketing podcast for influencers. Never miss an episode. Subscribe now with your iPhone, Android, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.